Welcome back into the Conference USA Podcast Roundtable. I am your host for the evening, Jake Bolden, host of the Blue Raider Podcast. Today, in our episode live streaming, we will be covering the Legacy Division, as we are deeming it, full of the Conference USA members that I guess are legends in this case. We're going to have one in particular who's going to be potentially leaving us in 2026, as well as another member today in the UTEP minors that is definitely leaving us in 2026. So if you will, this could potentially be some sort of final farewell retirement tour for two podcasts in particular. But nonetheless, thank you all for joining us today. I'm excited really about not only previewing some football, as we are 1 week away from week 0 between the Hilltoppers and Sam Houston. But today is all about these 6 programs, learning a little bit about them. But before we get into those previews, I want to take just a second to introduce all of our podcasts that are joining us today. And we will kick things off with Jake Gibson from Paws Up.
How's it going, everybody? It's great to see you all again. I absolutely love these podcast roundtable episodes, especially with how Conference USA continues to evolve and change. It's good to see some familiarity here. But yeah, it is Jake Gibson, the host of the Paws Up Podcast, myself and Kevin Barral. It's been an absolute dream over there at the Paws Up Podcast. We recently had our 100th episode not that long ago, so definitely a big benchmark for us. And yeah, we're just, as I'm sure you all know, we're getting right into the thick of the fall semester and all of the sports, with football, of course, being the big one. So it's going to be busy for us down here in the 305, and just can't wait to get out there on August 29th for our season opener at Pitbull Stadium against Bethune-Cookman.
Great stuff from Jake Gibson at Paws Up. Next, it is going to be Evan from Go Tech Please Don't Die, or Leave Us for that matter.
Yeah, sorry guys, I'm leaving the chat now. Just kidding. Yeah, I'm Evan from Go Tech Please Don't Die. We cover Louisiana Tech athletics in kind of a fun, zany way. You may have seen our antics on Twitter. We like to rile up the Sunbelt fan bases that hate us, and will learn to love us maybe with time. But our new episodes typically come out in the football season on Wednesdays. We're an old school podcast. We pre-record and edit and all that stuff, so no live streaming from us. But yeah, we're a fun follow on Twitter for sure. GOTECHPLSDNTDIE. You can check out our blog. We have some merch, gtpdd.dog. And yeah, follow along if you like, kind of silly coverage. We're not the in-depth guys usually. But yeah, I'll toss it back to you, Jake.
Great stuff, Evan. Next, I feel like I have to hate the next person I'm introducing because of the rivalry that is MTSU and WKU. However, we've gotten along over the years. He's mentored me into the podcasting space. One of the more long-tenured podcast hosts here on the Podcast Roundtable. It is Stephen Moffitt.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you for having me, Jake. And obviously, I'm glad to be here with the Roundtable. I think it's a really fun exercise when we all get together and just talk about our teams, because nobody knows our teams, our players, our programs as well as we do. So it's really fun when we get together and we do this. You can find us here on Twitter. We're at @Topper_Talk. This is our 4th season now going on covering the team. We cover the teams and the programs year round. We don't take any breaks during the calendar year. We cover every single program, every single athlete. During the summer, we just completed a position group series breakdown that we do for the football team. And in this transfer portal era, it seems more important than ever that we kind of learn more about this team and who the players are that have joined the roster, and just what we need to know about each position group, what the strengths are, what the depth chart looks like. And that's been a really fun exercise. We usually put our episodes out on Tuesdays or Wednesdays at the latest. We like to have them out by midweek, especially now that we're getting into normal game week schedules on Saturday. But yeah, it's been really fun, and obviously really looking forward to this discussion.
Great stuff. Lastly, joining us here is going to be Christian from the Bus Stop. The first time on the Conference USA Podcast Roundtable, we had to go to the depths of Las Cruces to find someone that does a podcast, and we found a good one. So Christian, thanks for joining us.
Hey, no, thanks for having me, guys. Really appreciate it. I'm with EP Sports Network. We're based out of El Paso, Texas, which is probably about 30 minutes away from Las Cruces, but we cover both. We do extensive coverage of UTEP, EPCC baseball and softball. We cover all the high schools. We live stream them on YouTube. So you can catch volleyball and football live stream on our YouTubes. And then I take the trek out to Las Cruces and cover the team as much as I can. Had a baby recently, so I kind of slipped up on the coverage a little bit, but we're bringing it back. And hopefully I'm bringing a host with me, Isaiah Reed, who used to play for NMSU on the defensive line a couple years back. So we'll bring him on, and we'll start dropping episodes Tuesdays to recap what happened the week before and look forward to the week going. But you can find us wherever you get your podcasts, and on epsportsnetwork.com, you see the full extensive coverage that we do locally and in the surrounding areas. But I appreciate you guys having me on.
Absolutely. Great to finally have a representative of NMSU, as well as someone who's not with us tonight that we will be covering is the UTEP Miners. One of the professional, that is Adrian Broaddus. He is the host at 600 ESPN El Paso. He is also host of the Miner Talk, but I would be remiss if I didn't plug that he's currently on the radio live on 600 El Paso ESPN, as he is Monday through Friday from 4 to 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. But don't worry, Miner fans, we're not going to miss you guys. We do have a pre-recorded segment with Adrian talking a little bit about the Miners and Coach Scotty Walden, so stick around for that. Lastly, I almost forgot to introduce myself. As I said, I am the host of the Blue Raider podcast, as well as your host for this evening. I'll be sharing some live streaming host duties here on the roundtable along with Jake Gibson of Paws Up Podcast. So excited to be not only that part or the liaison that is for the Conference USA Podcast Roundtable, but if you're into the Blue Raiders, of course, the Blue Raider Pod, X, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Blue Raider Pod. We release episodes every Tuesday, but for football season, we're doing something a little bit differently. We'll be doing our Behind Enemy Lines with many of your podcast hosts on Friday before those kickoffs or those midweek games. So look forward to doing that. Once again, as we have people pouring in to look ahead into this upcoming season, let's go ahead and get into it, guys. First off, we'll get right into it with Jake Gibson of Paws Up Podcast. New head coach, a lot to be excited about. I'm sure Pitbull Stadium is going to be rocking for that first game. Tell me, Jake, not only what is the feeling in Miami of the new head coach, but how do you think he performed offseason wise as far as his talent acquisition going into his first year?
Yeah, thank you, Jake. I just realized I didn't plug any of the of our ats during that monologue, so bear with me for just a second. At Jake the MC, my personal, where you can catch my FIU football coverage for Lemon City Live. At Paws Up Podcast to catch all of the great stuff that we do over there. Our episodes mainly drop on Thursdays, with some occasions being on Tuesdays. And of course, my co-host at Kevin_Baral. He is also he's also dialed in with FIU football and a lot of other sports for FIU athletics. So one big happy family here in South Florida. But yeah, Willie Simmons, my gosh, he has absolutely come in and changed how a lot of people view this FIU football squad. He comes in here bearing a lot of success at the FCS level with either Prairie View A&M, Florida A&M. He has never had a losing record as a head coach of a program. And he's coming off a power conference experience, being a part of the Duke coaching staff. Willie Simmons is a Florida guy. He's from Tallahassee. He understands the absolute insane talent that the Sunshine State holds in football. And he has prioritized recruiting here first, everywhere second. And I think that is absolutely a genius move, considering all the amount of high school talent and that is in our backyard. And he's just bringing order to this program. We've been pretty stagnant these last few years with a 4-8 record, but this is definitely feeling like one of those seasons where you really feel like we have the right guy that can take us to a bowl game, our first since 2019.
The big question over this offseason was, with the coaching change, are they going to be able to keep their quarterback? That was accomplished. I guess the next question is, besides Keon Jenkins, who I personally, and I'm sure you share the same sentiment, am upset that he didn't get Conference USA all-round table selection, although he was our power ranking number 1 earlier this offseason. But we'll leave it be. Maverick McIver won fair and square. But what kind of a talent is now going to be helping Keon?
Well, that's the interesting part, because last season you had the 1-2 punch of Eric Rivers and Dean Patterson as your top 2 wide receivers. They're gone. They both went to Georgia Tech, funnily enough. So we're going to have a clean slate of new receivers for Keywan to work with. But Keywan himself has become the veteran of the team now in his 3rd year. We had Willie Simmons on the show not that long ago. He talked about that was probably his biggest acquisition, was retaining Jenkins, who had entered his name into the transfer portal, then took it out. So he's staying with us for his 3rd season. And as I'm sure all you guys know, to retain a quarterback that has talent for 3 seasons in the group of 5 is not an easy task to do these days in the world of college football. So he has so much potential, and I think he has more room to develop and turn into maybe one of the best quarterbacks in the group of 5 football. And like I said, you're going to have a whole bunch of new wide receivers to work with. I really like what I've seen so far from Alex Perry, among the others. You are going to have a very deadly running back group, I think, because you did retain a lot of your talent there with Devontae Lyons and Keyshawn Owens. You bring in Anthony Carey, who I liked as well. And then you of course, you can always rely on that FIU defense with a very solid-looking secondary. So I know a lot of teams, not just a Conference USA, but in Group of 5, either have completely overhauled rosters or did a great job of retaining everybody. Somehow, FIU is kind of in the middle, where they have some holes they need to fill, but I think most of the really important positions they have experience in, which is great to see.
Now tell me, going through those positional units, where do you feel the most confident for the Panthers?
It's hard not to go running back room because we saw the breakout of Devontae Lyons towards the latter end of last season, not to mention the reliability of Keyshawn Owens. And then you bring a guy from Georgia Tech and Anthony Carey, who has looked really, really good in both spring and fall camps. But it's kind of crazy to realize that one of the most confident positions I'm in is the quarterback position, because you don't really get that a whole lot most times. But between Keywan and some of the other guys we brought in, like Clayton Dees, Joe Bazansky, it's looking really good there. But man, those defensive backs that FIU have, coached by Anthony Gator, between Brian Blades, Victor Evans, Antonio Patterson, Websley Etienne, there is a lot of deep talent there. I mean, Brian Blades specifically, if there was any Panther who I think could have a good shot at getting drafted after the season's over, it would be the redshirt senior defensive back, being Blades. So yeah, there are a lot of great positions here. I also just saw Kevin Burrell commented saying, "I love you, Jake. I love you too, Kevin." So there you go.
You told me the great that is Jenkins. You told me the good. Now, where could potentially FIU slip up this season and make life harder for Coach Simmons?
Ooh, well, I think there's always unpredictability in the offensive line, and I think that's a sentiment that every school in Conference USA and like every college football team always has wonders about their offensive line, retaining them. Can the new guys step up and fill those empty positions? But I mean, we had very good running backs last season, but even with that, the running game wasn't as good as it could have been because the offensive line didn't do the most exceptional job of creating gaps for those backs. If they can actually work on that alongside protecting Keywan, which I think they did an okay job last year, I think that would definitely be a much better group. And as weird as it is to say, the kicker position might be a little interesting because we saw both kickers perform in the spring game way back when, and both of them didn't look too great. Now, I mean, there was a difference in turfs compared to what they use at Pitbull Stadium compared to Breckfields, yada, yada, yada. But still, definitely, until I see someone, hit a 50-something yarder, I'm going to have my doubts on that kicker position. But I think there's not many positions where I'm like extremely worried about if they'll do good or not. There are some where I think that, okay, they'll be adequate at the worst. And then obviously you have the other positions like running backs, QB, secondary, where I feel pretty strongly confident in.
Lastly, here as we wrap up the FIU preview, the Panthers haven't been to a bowl game since 2019. Mm-hmm. You already talked about Simmons' past record at FCS level. And I myself, and much like Christian did with Tony Sanchez last year, I don't know what it was like in Las Cruces, but I can tell you in Murfreesboro, we were high on Coach Mason that first year. We thought things were going to go really, really well, but we was a really bad season. So I guess are the expectations reasonable would you say it's reasonable? Or do they think 6 wins is feasible? What's the read there?
I'm going to say 6 wins is very feasible, and the simple answer is because I'm predicting them to go 7-5, and so is Kevin. So bam, boom, done. No, but I again, the roster I think can definitely be built to get some wins in conference play, and I think the Panthers do have a relatively favorable schedule. They got a tough non-con, obviously going to Penn State. I mean, woof. And then you have the rivalry against FAU, but it is at Pitbull Stadium this season, so I feel pretty confident. Then you got to go to UConn, which is a pretty good team over there in Connecticut. But I think they have a pretty favorable conference schedule, all things considered. They take on the newcomers in Missouri State and Delaware. They host teams like Kennesaw State. They don't have to go out west to play either UTEP or New Mexico State this season. And like 3 of their last 4 games, I believe, are at home. So I think that they have a pretty favorable schedule. That's why I feel really good about them. Not to mention that, I have trust in Willie Simmons right now, and in my quarterback Kewan Jenkins, and that's what we all want. Like if the FIU fan base is dying to see the Panthers in a bowl game again, so you got to get to those 6 wins, and I actually do feel pretty good that they can accomplish that.
Look forward to seeing the Panthers and really Coach Simmons, who also has a little bit of an MTSU past history, someone who I thought would be on the docket to be hired in Murfreesboro when they parted ways with Stockstill. But obviously we wish him nothing but the best until he's playing the Blue Raiders. But Jake, I appreciate you once again for sharing the preview there for the Panthers. Let's move on now to Evan over at GoTech. Please don't die. Evan, exciting offseason, would you say? Conference news aside, I think the biggest news is that Sonny Cumbie's back.
And are you asking me if that's good news?
In a way, I suppose.
Our offseason feels real weird, man, because we kind of found out we were going to retain Cumbie. Had that weird bowl game thing come up with Marshall dropping out and us getting to go to a bowl. So like, did we earn that spot? No, we were 5-7. We didn't really have the academic progress rating to be the highest ranked, but we're right down the road. So go ahead and take us. Sure. We got Tony Franklin back, which I know our MTSU friend here feels very differently than Tech fans do.
Significantly.
Tech fans remember the number 1 offense in the country in 2012, putting up like 47 points a game, pretty fun. Of course, that took him 3 years and Rustin to accomplish. So we also lost our DC, number 1 defense in the conference last year under Jeremiah Johnson. He's gone, went to Coastal Carolina. So from a coaching standpoint, I mean, we've retained the head coach that nobody really seems to like. We lost the DC that everybody seemed to love. And we got back a coach that is highly regarded, at least in Rustin. So yeah, a little bit weird from a coaching standpoint. Players, it's unclear at this point to me whether it's going to be, did we upgrade in the offseason? Did we downgrade? But I was thinking about this and I'm like, how much talent does a team that's won 11 games in 3 years really have to lose in the portal or to graduation? Key names like True Edwards, Marquise Crosby, Jimmy Holiday, those guys are out. That's going to hurt. We lost a couple of starters from the offensive line. Our best defensive lineman, David Blay, transferred down to Miami. Not to FIU, though. Sorry, Jake. To the other school down there, I guess. Coral Gables, not to Miami. Sorry. And a couple of other defensive linemen. So there's just a lot of like question marks at a lot of positions. So I think overall, like offseason wise, losing Jeremiah Johnson is probably the number 1 concern for me because we just don't know about Luke Olson, who comes to us from Jacksonville State. We just don't know about him. So I don't know. Keeping one of our worst head coaches of all time feels like we underachieved a little bit, I think is where I land.
An outsider looking in synopsis, although I consider myself a Tony Franklin skeptic. I'm not going to say hater, but a skeptic, if you will.
Sure.
It looks like they made a net zero because I can see where the love for Tony Franklin is. But let's get to some of these players to know. When you look back at the All-CUSA Roundtable, the only member from La Tech that made it on the defensive side was, to no surprise, Colby Fields, linebacker. So aside from him, we all know the talent that he's going to provide to that defensive backfield. the quarterback play was the big question mark last year. How do you feel in that regard? What are the names that CUSA fans need to know?
Yeah. Colby Fields obviously goes without saying. He's the conference player of the year, preseason defensive player of the year for a reason. He was the lone representative of our voting as well here at the roundtable. So the quarterback play you mentioned, that's been interesting so far. I think at least, sort of medium informed fans like myself kind of assumed that Evan Bullock would have the inside track to, retaining that starting position. Through fall camp so far, that doesn't actually seem to be the case. So there's a transfer that Tony Franklin brought in from California from a place called Saddleback College. Anybody? I got nothing. Saddleback College. Not a big JUCO California follower here. But a guy named Trey Kucook is looking like he might be the starting quarterback for the Southeastern game here at the end of the month. He's a little bit more run and gun, and it seems like that's what Tony Franklin is trying to do with the offense right now. Maybe because of the offensive line potential issues, I'm not sure. But it seems like mobility is being prioritized at the quarterback position. So Evan Bullock, much more of a pocket passer. He started for about half of the season last year and did pretty well. But it looks like, it's still a battle, but it's looking like Kucook is winning the battle. So on the defensive side of the ball, I think a household name by the end of the season in Conference USA circles will be Jacob Fields. He's kind of already made a name for himself at safety, but when he was a true freshman, he actually played running back a little bit too. I think he busted a long run at the end of the Tech UTEP game his freshman season 2 years ago that broke that game open and finally kind of put it in the balance sheet for Tech. Look for him to actually play a little bit on both sides of the ball this season. So maybe not a full, Travis Hunter type situation, but there will be specific packages on offense to get him involved because he's a really good playmaker that kind of needs to see the field. Then a couple other guys, there's an outside wide receiver that came in with Trey Kucook from Saddleback College. Franklin wasn't even there to recruit him, but he impressed so much that he offered him a walk-on spot that in spring ball became a scholarship. And now he's looking like he might be the starting outside wide receiver in week 1. So going from catching 400 yards last year at a JUCO in California to being a D1 starter is kind of interesting, but apparently he's just one of those guys who just really gets after it and gives you everything he's got on every snap. So I think those are just a couple names to look out for.
And I know you said that it's still hard to kind of gauge necessarily what units are going to be good and bad because you just don't know what's out there, and the retention, like you talked about, not necessarily a good team, but from from what you can see, are there units that you feel comfortable with? And then on the other side, are there units that you feel, less favorable about?
Yeah, I think for sure the linebackers, led by Colby Fields, obviously, but there's some other guys there with a lot of starting experience, and a lot of tackles between them. Sifo Leota and Mackie Mason. These guys create a pretty good unit there in the middle of the defense. So I'm definitely looking forward to watching them. I've kind of already touched on this. The defensive line is a huge question mark for me. I'm really worried about being able to stop the run. We kept our nose tackle, Zion Nason, is still here, but outside of him, it's kind of all new names that, again, as a medium level informed fan, I'm not really familiar with these guys, where they came from, what they did at their previous locations. So hopefully, they'll demand, our attention in the first couple weeks of the season. In terms of the offense, I think the running back room is very strong. Get back Omiri Wiggins, who was the leading rusher last year. We've got Amani Gibbons returning as well. He was the second leading rusher last year. Then there's a couple of incoming names that, again, not like huge transfer news that they came in, but a guy named Andrew Burnett, who rushed for 2,000 yards and 31 touchdowns in 2 seasons at the NAIA level. So again, does that transfer to D1 FBS? It remains to be seen. Then there's another guy from Navarro, Clay Thievenin, who was committed to Missouri State, but then flipped to Tech. and he's been really explosive through fall camp and spring ball. So kind of gives Tony Franklin some versatility. You know, there's some guys who can catch out of the backfield, guys who can be your sort of third down back, and guys who, you know, are more bell cow types. So there should be some versatility and ability to go with the hot hand. And then finally, Jake, you mentioned the kicker position. I had that in my notes as well for Tech. Buck Buchanan left. He went to Colorado. I guess Dion got in his ear. I don't know. And Buck Buchanan had some consistency issues, but he could kick the damn football like very far. I don't think I ever saw him miss a touchback on a kickoff, so we're going to miss that. We got a couple of guys who I haven't heard great things out of fall camp reports yet. So yeah, when they tee it up, when they snap it, is he going to hit a 30-yarder? I don't know, right? If we have a game-winning field goal opportunity, do we have somebody? I don't know. So that remains to be seen.
Well, amongst everything, I hear some skepticism, but don't take my word for it. Also take Kevin Burrell, co-host with Jake Gibson over at the Paws Up Podcast. He said, why is there so much hype around La Tech this season? Solely based on Bullock coming back and the defense, ? Bit confused because aside from the defense, La Tech was pretty underwhelming last season. And I know that you kind of share that sentiment. I lead that into our final question.
Oh, yeah.
What's the expectation this year?
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing for me too, Jake, because, you know, Vegas puts us at 5.5 wins, which to us, the way we used to be, that's like, damn, that sucks. Like, that's an awful season. But now, I mean, we haven't hit 5.5 since 2019, right? 2020, we went 5-5 in the COVID year. So we haven't had 6 wins in a very long time. I am shocked because it feels like, you know, on our threads on the Bleed Tech Blue forums and on Twitter, all of the people engaging with us, it's like, you know, woe is me, like Tech is awful. We still have Cumbie, like, we're not going to win, you know, back to 3 wins again. Right. But then you go into a thread where it's like, predict how many, you know, where will Tech finish in Conference USA? And everybody's like 4 or higher. And I'm like, how does this jive with us feeling like the end is near and we suck? And, you know, so I don't get it either, what the hype is. And, you know, you mentioned Bullock coming back. Is Bullock playing? I don't know. I mean, I guess your guess is as good as mine at this point. But, you know, I really think, you know, for me, I will know a lot more about this team after the first 4 games. Everybody could say that, right? That's kind of a lame thing to say, but we're playing Southeastern, so we got an FCS opponent. We're playing LSU. I'm not going to learn anything in that game. Let's just be honest. We're playing LSU on the road, 8:30 kickoff or whatever the fuck. Sorry, I don't know if we're allowed to swear on this one. We do on ours, so.
We're good.
Okay. So, but then we go out, we play New Mexico State, and then we have Southern Miss. So, if we come out of those games 3-1, I feel like we're in the hunt. We might be able to pull things together. We figured things out to be positive at that point. If we come out 2-2 or, you know, 1-3, I mean, 2-2, I'm like, okay, maybe we get to 6-6. That's like the ceiling for that season. 1-3, I'm like, where are the 2 to get us to Cumbie's like patented 3-win season? I don't know. I don't know enough about the offensive line and the quarterback position right now to feel very confident about this group. Defensive line, I mentioned earlier, stopping the run, I think is going to be a big question for this team. So I feel like under the 5.5 of Vegas is where I'm at. That's my gut. I'd probably put us at like 4-8. And honestly, that's just because there's some teams in this conference that something in me says like Louisiana Tech cannot lose to this opponent. Now I've been wrong about that a lot of times in the past. So, you know, Delaware, right? We go to Delaware in November. How could we possibly lose to Delaware? I'm sure I'll find out. I'm going to try to go in person because when else am I going to have that opportunity? But I'll find out how we can lose to Delaware. But right now it feels like that's got to be a win, right? So I'm gonna say 4-8 under the Vegas total. Not buying the hype.
There you have it. Evan from GoTech, please don't die on the Bulldogs. And I would think a lot of people share that sentiment. 5.5 is a great line, in my opinion, because La Tech, if there was ever a team in this conference that could go 8-4 and consequently go 4-8, that's the team right there. A lot of question marks around Sonny, and a lot of it is because of your head coach, and I think you'll agree to that. But excited to see what the Bulldogs can do with Coach Franklin and Cumbie.
Yeah. And I saw one person commented on the pronunciation of Q-Cook. I think that's right. I looked it up. I tried. I'm doing my due diligence there, because we were all trying to figure it out in our Facebook chat, and there were a lot of suggestions for how that could be pronounced. But I think that's right.
Well, now you have the official pronunciation for all of us to use. So if it's wrong, it's going to be totally on Evan. Well, we're going to move things along here, getting close to that halfway mark. We've got Stephen Moffitt from Topper Talk, the Hilltoppers, runners-up last year in Conference USA Championship. Again, another big question mark for Hilltoppers fans, because they don't even know if they like their coach or not. But there's one thing for certain: they love that quarterback.
Yeah, there definitely is a lot of polar opinions on Coach Tyson Helton, entering his 7th season. And most of that just revolves around the fact that he just hasn't gotten over the hump and won that big game yet. We got there in 2021 with Bailey Zappi. We got there last year, obviously, with Caden Veltkamp, made it to the championship game and just got blown out. Looking forward to this season, bringing in a lot of new players, just like every other school and team in this conference. I think we had 28 graduating seniors. We had 27 players leave via the portal. So, a lot of new names and faces and numbers and players to get familiar with. But the biggest question mark was, who's going to be quarterback? And we went to the familiar recipe of finding an FCS guy and his offensive coordinator, and Rick Bowie and Maverick McIver from Abilene Christian last year, who, had a very, very successful season together, have had a good career. Rick Bowie as offensive coordinator is a really solid young mind, and I like to give Coach Helton a lot of credit in that sense, that he is very good at identifying not only players that fit his system, but coaches that fit his system as well. He finds good young minds that can develop into solid position or coordinator coaches, and then puts them in position to be successful. They go on. We've got Ben Arbuckle that's at Oklahoma now, Zach Kitley that's at FAU. It feels like every single year we're changing OCs. And last year we had Will Friend at OC, and it just kind of was an experiment that didn't go as well as we wanted it to. Down the line, I think we end up averaging 24 points per game last season, and that's well below, what WKU is known for and expected. We're usually well above 30 points per game with the offense that Tyson Helton likes to run. So bringing in Maverick McIver should help remedy that expectation, but there's a lot of new pieces at Western Kentucky that have to fit together and figure it out to have a good, successful season.
Well, tell me a little bit about some of these guys. When we reflect at the all-around table offense, obviously, as we prefaced at the very beginning, Maverick McIver is the quarterback selection, as well as Katie Hutchinson at wide receiver. And, of course, one of the best offensive linemen, I believe had the most votes amongst our offensive linemen, was Marshall Jackson. So you've got some anchors there on the offensive side of the ball that, again, with Tyson Helton's history, you got to feel good. But what are some other names that we may be missing?
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised to see Maverick, on top of that quarterback ranking, just to be fair and honest. But I guess it really just comes down to that historical expectation at Western Kentucky. You can almost kind of plug in QB1 at Western as going to be a guy that throws for, 4,500 yards, close to 40 touchdowns. So, I guess that's the tipping point, for Maverick and what his expectations are. You mentioned Katie Hutchinson. He's a returning redshirt junior that we have a lot of expectations for. We brought in a wide receiver from the FCS ranks from Western Illinois, and Matt Henry, who had over 1,200 yards receiving last year. Likely going to be wide receiver 1 this coming season, so have a lot of high expectations for him. And then a running back that we brought in from Austin Peay. Previously, before that, was a running back at the University of Kentucky by the name of Lavelle Wright. Going to kind of be a 1-2 punch with himself and George Hart that's returning from this last season. So, there's a lot of depth and a lot of quality talent on the offensive side of the ball. Now, a lot of it is just new names and faces that even our fans, are looking at our wide receiver room going, I don't know who any of these guys are, is our wide receiver group an issue, or is it a question mark this year? But you look at a guy like Phil Steele that, dives into every team, especially G5, as much as anyone else in the nation, and he has us tied for the best wide receiver room in the conference. And then you start diving into who those players are, where they came from, stats that they have. We're going to be fine in that department. The offensive side of the ball should be pretty stout, like we expect it to be, and we want to get back to that 30 points per game mark. But just unknown names and a lot of new faces. But definitely those few guys we just talked about are ones to look out for.
Talk about a lot there on the offense. On that defensive side, though, I guess is that kind of where you have any concerns with the Hilltoppers this year, is on the defense side of the ball?
Yeah, definitely defensively is more of a question mark. Now, I feel really good about our back end, the secondary, our cornerbacks, and DeMarco Williams and Kent Robinson, and then Almahi Ali and Braxton Myers, a couple transfers that we brought in. I feel really good about our secondary as far as they should be the strength of the defensive unit. There's definitely question marks as far as the defensive line. It's basically a whole new front there, and then the linebackers as well. It's just there's a lot of new there. But the staff, I know, feels really good about the pieces we brought in. They feel really good about the depth that we have. And one of the guys that I would be watching out for is defensive end Harper Holloman. He's a young guy that really kind of had a breakout spring for us. He was a spring MVP on the defensive side and has continued that into fall. We really have a lot of expectations for him. And then I mentioned Almahi Ali. He's a transfer safety from Charlotte. Again, he just seems to have a nose for the ball. He reminds me of that Upton Stout type player that we had last year that was just always around the ball, always making a play. It seemed like the ball found him a lot. So while there are questions on that side of the ball, and it's definitely, the defensive line, has to figure it out first, has to be able to get pressure, has to be able to stop the run. I think we have the pieces there. We just have to put it together and make it work this season.
In a league with so many first-time head coaches, the transfer portal is just a revolving door for all these programs. The one thing that does seem to be consistent, as much as I might not like it, is Western Kentucky's going to field a good football team. I guess my final question now is the expectation to return back to the Conference USA Championship, hopefully with a better outcome?
Yeah, I mean, the expectation and the way the schedule sets up, I mean, the non-conference schedule, we have LSU and Toledo. Those are tough games. We also have Nevada at home, and then we have North Alabama and FCS teams. So, if we can come out of the non-conference at least 2-2, I think we have a shot to get, close to double-digit wins, maybe 8 to 9. 10 is possible, but it seems like every year Helton will have one game with it's just a clunker. Last year it was the Louisiana Tech game, 7-12 here at Houchin Smith Stadium. It was just ugly. We couldn't put the offense together. But all the pieces are there. I mean, we're breaking in a new offensive coordinator, but we feel really good about that. We're breaking in 2 new defensive coordinators, but they've been here. They've been in the system. They know the expectations and what we're implementing. So it's new, but it doesn't feel as new as it would be as an outside hire per se. But yeah, the expectation is that we're going to compete for a conference championship, and that's going to be, every single year under Tyson Helton. He's done a great job with the transfer portal. Like you said, for the last several years, he kind of I feel like he was ahead of the transfer portal before it became the monster and the free agency that it is now. Since 2019, he's embraced the portal as, okay, I can go find some players that make my team better. And he's always been really good and really successful at finding those pieces, whether it's position players or linemen, whomever it is, and plugging them into our roster and making us better. But yeah, definitely the expectation is that with the schedule and with the talent that we have is, come November, we should be competing to be in the conference championship game. We avoid playing Liberty this year. We don't play them or UTEP or Kennesaw. But Liberty's kind of been a thorn in our side in recent years. And if everything plays out right, or, how the preseason power rankings are, maybe we play them in the conference championship game and try to get over that hump and get that monkey off our back, not only for Helton, but just beating Liberty in general since they joined the conference.
I'm certain it'll do a lot for Bowling Green fans if they do finally get over that hump for Coach Helton and win that Conference USA championship. But excited to see what they're able to do in Bowling Green. As we continue on here with our Conference USA preview, I'm going to turn things over now to a pre-recorded episode with Adrian Broadus to talk all things now here on the Conference USA Podcast Roundtable as we preview what we're deeming the Legacy Division. It is host over at 600 ESPN El Paso, and the main objective he's here is the host of the Minor Talk Podcast. It is Adrian Broadus. Adrian, thanks for joining us.
Jake, CUSA Roundtable, fans of Conference USA, it's great to be back. I got to count these times right now, man. They're limited. They're numbered. These times are now numbered. The appearances from us on the Minor Talk crew are numbered, but we're so happy to be back and appreciate it as always, man.
Numbered indeed. Now you're kind of up for a debate now. Who are we going to miss more? We're going to miss Adrian and Minor Talk and UTEP Zay, or now we got Go Tech, who's going to be leaving us this year as well. So a little bit of room for exiting the door here. But Adrian, let's kind of get into the meat and potatoes here. Scotty Walden going into year 2. What's the energy like? What does El Paso think about this offseason that Coach Walden had?
Yeah, guys, I mean, the expectations are a little higher this year compared to year 1. You get a guy in Malachi Nelson, a former 5-star prospect who was formerly a top overall player in his recruiting class to sign and commit to UTEP. You couple that with the fact that you sign back-to-back CUSA top recruiting classes by all of these different, recruiting platforms like 247 Sports, coupled with the fact that UTEP's leaving the conference, right? So a little bit of bittersweet part of that. The bitter side comes from people, from the conference, comes from people, maybe even fans, outside the conference and stuff like that. And then you have UTEP fans who are excited about the opportunity to move to the Mountain West, where it makes a lot more geographic sense for schools like UTEP to reunite with schools that they played in the past, whether it was WAC teams, teams even they had more familiarity with that you'd think about in the 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever it might be. So for right now, I think vibes are good here in El Paso. Fans are excited to watch some football. Does that translate to wins? Of course not. Like, the hype and all of that is just hype itself. And so I wonder how that will translate into the fall as Scotty Walden hopes to win some more games here compared to last year's 3-9 season.
The biggest question for you guys, is this going to be the first year that you don't have 4 starting quarterbacks?
That's a great one. I don't know the answer to that, Jake. I still don't. I mean, today we're sitting here talking week 2 of fall camp, and this starting quarterback battle is still up for grabs. Some speculated last week that could they be narrowing the quarterback search to just Malachi Nelson and Skylar Locklear, who started a couple games for the Miners last year, but was their day 1 starter last year. He was their preferred guy going into year 1 of Scotty Walden last season. So this year, I mean, now they're saying it's still a 4-man race, and throwing in Shea Smith, the redshirt freshman, and throwing in Cade McConnell, the graduate quarterback, in the mix as well. So a 4-man race. I tweeted it a week ago, I should say, but UTEP has averaged over 3 starting quarterbacks every single year, dating back a decade ago, Jake. So to answer your question, I have no clue. I think continuity at the quarterback position, period, is hard to find in Conference USA. Like, a lot of these teams across this league can sympathize with this, that you have a quarterback race, or maybe you have the guy and the guy gets hurt and you're having to shuffle around quarterbacks. It's kind of a situation that teams in CUSA deal with when they're not able to get, your premier type of quarterbacks necessarily through things like the portal, or you lose that guy because of the portal and due to things like attrition. So it just kind of is what it is. And I think this team is embracing it either way, to roll with the punches and have to be prepared to start multiple guys if they do so, or try to find stability and search for that where it is continuity at that quarterback position for one guy being the guy all season long.
The Vegas odds are coming out now after this conversation. It's 2.5. That's going to be the number of starting quarterbacks this year for Coach Walden. So I think I like you said, the battle of attrition for quarterbacks is going to be tough. But I personally think, I know Walden is not one to make that comment, but I think it's got to be down to 2 guys, right? It's got to be Locklear and Malachi Nelson.
If you had to, Jake, if you asked me today on Monday, August 11th, who's going to be the starting quarterback, all I could do is speculate, right? Like, I can't give you a definite answer or anything like that. So I'm just going to side with all the national guys and probably all the guys that you guys talk to, right? Where I'm just going to say, I'm going to think it's Malachi Nelson, and that's just a guess. That's just my thought. I have no inside knowledge on the quarterback race right now, but I'm watching it during fall camp, and I would just, and everything around it, all the off-season hype and all of that, it points to the direction of, for me at least, saying Malachi is your day one starter. If I had to pick today, I wish I could, continue to evaluate these two quarterbacks for the next couple of weeks and make a true assessment on who I believe should be the starting quarterback, or like if I was head coach Scotty Walden, who would I choose? But if I had to pick right now on that decision, I'm picking, me personally, Malachi Nelson. Maybe that's too early, but that's just me thinking that out loud right now with you.
Let's take the heat off the signal caller. Tell me about some of these other positional groups that you feel comfortable with in year two for Coach Walden.
Well, I feel strong about the continuity they brought back offensively with guys like Cam Thomas and Kenny Odom back in the mix, both all-conference caliber players. And when you bring in Cam Thomas into the mix, he's just an absolute cerebral player in the sense that he is so versatile. He could play at the wideout position, at the slot position. You can move him over and have him in motion. You could have him on special teams. You can have him out of the backfield. You could have him taking jet sweeps. Like, you could do so much with him on the field as a player. He's just so impressive. And then Kenny Odom was as productive as you can get last year for the Miners. And they bring both of those players back. That can't be taken for granted if you're the Miners. Now, they've got to solve some things on their offensive line. I think they're going to play some younger guys earlier than maybe some expected. And then I think as far as the running back group goes, I think this will be the most surprising group of them all. I mean, with Hashawn Wilson coming from Charlotte, you've got Ashton Emery a year into the system, and now he's coming in as his redshirt freshman year. Like, he wants to be productive. Like, he wants to have a good season too. So as far as the skill position players go, maybe not as worried as I once was in April, maybe even May. I think I'm in a pretty good position right now, or I think UTEP's in a good place right now when it comes to some of their weapons.
Talked about the questionable and the good, and we're joined here with Miner Talk host Adrian Broadus. Adrian, what's the bad? What should Miner fans be concerned about?
Well, I would say that it's 40 new players who are coming into this roster, and it's 2 new coordinators, right? I mean, you're talking about a new offensive coordinator coming into the mix in Mark Kalla after Jake Brown stepped down from the position last offseason. You're talking about Bobby Daly replacing J.J. Clark as the defensive coordinator. Remember, J.J. Clark had a lot of success his first year at UTEP, and he parlayed that into an assistant job with the Dallas Cowboys on defense. There's a reason why that happened. I mean, they were the leader in Conference USA in sacks. They did a great job of turning teams over and turning the ball over. They had 2 defensive touchdowns their final game of the season against New Mexico State on the road. So they were trending in a nice direction, and they had guys who they just lost to the portal because those guys were ultra productive and they went out and chased a bag in the offseason. So can't blame all of them. I mean, it's what a lot of teams in CUSA see every single year, where their top talent is kind of plucked away. At the same time, I mean, those are kind of concerning points to me, is that when you lose 40 players, you're going to question things like depth. You're going to question things at certain position groups and stuff like that. And this team and coaching staff has remained overly positive about the newcomers, especially the freshmen, and about the coordinators that they have in place. Like, they think that those things are all positives for UTEP moving forward.
As the resident MTSU podcast host, I was very thankful to see that the Raiders were going to avoid the Miners this year, because I think this team has a lot of potential. But they also, as you've kind of touched on, there's reason to speculate, could they be that good? And I think it all starts from what's going to happen under center. Adrian, as we hang it up here, what's your expectations this year? Is the 6-win bowl mark possible?
I'm not there yet, Jake. And everybody on this Conference USA Roundtable should not be there, okay? Because if you're the guy who's here, boots on the ground is not there, then this roundtable should not be there, okay? So I'm convincing you guys as a Conference USA Roundtable to just not be there yet. Like, temper your expectations when it comes to UTEP football. I get it. UTEP Twitter is loud. They want to get out there. They want to be active. They want to tell you how excited they are for the season. I've been there before. I've seen this before. I've seen the hype train come and leave people in the dust and leave people wondering why they even jumped on the hype train to begin with. So I'm not going to be there just yet. I want to watch. I want to be cautiously optimistic. And I also want to believe that there are building pieces. There are some positives that you could still take away, even though you don't, you're not necessarily, if you don't get to that winning season. Like we were talking last week about the 5.5 over under total win mark. To me, step in the right direction is between 5-6 wins. Like that tells you that the hype translates to something that is a little bit more substantive. Can you be in your final couple weeks trying to kind of play for that bowl contention, even if you don't get to that place, right? Like, can you be in that mix? That's what I want to see from this team here in year 2. I have my expectations lower than other people out there when they're saying stuff like UTEP bowl bound, UTEP to the bowl express and stuff like that. I think those are all positive things to say, but I'm not going to get too excited or too low and say, oh, no, this team is totally, write them off, right? I'm just going to kind of be in the middle, even keel, and I would say the step in the right direction, 5-6 wins.
The seasoned vet Adrian Broadus, host of Minor Talk, he will not be swayed by the faithful there in El Paso. Adrian, lastly here, tell me the Minor Talk show, what's the upload schedule for those that are listening?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Jake. We're uploading at least a new episode every week leading up to the kickoff of the season. We're trying to do it like Wednesday, Thursday. So just follow my Twitter page at Adrian Broadus for more information, or listen to us daily. We do a daily radio show here Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. We throw it back. We do daily radio here in El Paso. People care. People call in on a daily basis. People love UTEP sports, love UTEP athletics. This is their pro team here in a city of 700,000 plus. And a beautiful community, a beautiful binational culture here in El Paso. So that's the kind of fan base, that's the kind of excitement over here. And hey, Jake, I just appreciate you including me in this whole Conference USA roundtable.
That was Adrian over at Minor Talk. I really appreciate him once again for taking the time to pre-record. And as he put it there, El Paso, big question marks. But we're going to throw it out there to the West Coast, I guess technically West Coast, one more time. We got Christian over at the bus stop, NMSU, Coach Sanchez, year 2. Another coach is going into another year where you're hoping to make some progress. What is kind of the feeling there in Las Cruces about Coach Sanchez going into that next year?
Go back to his UNLV days when he was the head coach. They were severely underachieving, and I think a lot of people right now are having low expectations but high pressure from the staff to move forward. They went 3-9 last year. They blew some leads where you easily could have said they had 5 wins, maybe even 6. They turned over the entire defense. They kept Coach Morris. They got a new coordinator in David Yost, kind of making a lateral move. They bring in a quarterback at Logan 5 who was from Montana, threw 14 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And that's something that they're truly missing last year. They had no passing game. They averaged 143 yards through the air, which is completely unheard of when you think about the game today. Their running game was super strong, but they lost both those guys in Washington and Seth McGowan. They're out. They brought some guys in. They brought Dijon Stanley and Callaway from Cal. Stanley's from Utah State. Both those guys are a little bit unproven, but they're D1 transfers. Stanley brings in your speed. Callaway brings in your power. So we're going to see those expectations kind of go up. I think right now for me, I have this team at 4 wins, maybe even 5. I think right now the total in Vegas is 4.5. But definitely there's some people are sitting on their hands waiting on the magic to come back. I mean, 2 years removed from the Coach Kill era, the 2 years of 7 wins and then 10 wins and having all that magic, and it sort of deflated last year. And I think Coach Sanchez, he takes a little bit of pride. He played here in the 80s as a wide receiver. So I know that he wants to have this program in a winning formula. They bring in a bunch of guys, so we'll see how it plays out throughout the year.
Would it be accurate to say that this team, I know you talked about the question marks that are on the offensive side, which they experienced a lot of last year, but is it fair to say that if the defense doesn't perform as well as it did last year, this team has no shot to be successful?
The defense, they improved in the secondary, but now the question is, can that secondary have some chemistry? Tyler Martinez and So Piu at that linebacker position, bring in a lot of strength. Gabe Patterson, too, at the defensive line. So this unit under Coach Morris, I thought, was really sound at times. And then sometimes they would let things just blow out of proportion. But if they are stronger than they were last year, which in some of these scrimmages they have been where it's all defense and the struggles came from the offense, that's going to be their shot at keeping things at bay. A strong defense with Coach Morris makes the difference. The offensive line, you're going to have 4 guys that are starting on the offensive line that have not played together. BJ Tolo is the only starter coming back from last year. So that kind of brings the question mark is can they answer the quarterback question, right? They bring in Jalen Patterson, they bring in Logan Five. So those are 2 guys that I believe that are really talented. But then look at the offensive line, that kind of takes time to get chemistry. And then you look at the running game and how they split that. Those are the question marks. Their wide receiver units are really strong with DJ Pride and BJ Johnson coming back. So there's some good there where I think 5 wins is attainable, maybe 6 or 7 if some of those swing games go their way. But right now they're improving a little bit from last year, but I think some fans want to see more than just that.
If there's another 3-9 season, is it possible that we see a very red hot seat under Coach Sanchez?
You can make it as red hot as you want, Jake. The problem is that NMSU does not have the money to fire. They've had that struggle in the past where they've just let contracts kind of play their way and not fire unless some booster just comes out of nowhere, but that's not happened in the past. It could be a really, really hot seat. Nothing will happen. Nothing will really change except you won't see fans in the stands, and maybe that's a bit of a message. But right now, I think it already is a little hot, and Coach Sanchez has to come out in the first 4 weeks and kind of temper the crowd a little bit.
Not able to fire a coach. That sounds oddly familiar to those of us here in Murfreesboro. But Christian, great to hear from you. Of course, your debut here on the Conference USA Podcast Roundtable. Lastly, I guess I'll take the floor for a quick second to talk about the Blue Raiders season ahead. A lot of excitement year 2 for Derek Mason, much like those that we've heard from today. There's an expectation that things are going to improve. One thing that Coach Mason said a lot last year was that this year, that his first season is technically year 0. He got hired late in December, had to scrounge around, find what he possibly could out of the transfer portal to put together a roster that is serviceable at best, in my opinion. But this roster that he's put together this year has reason to create a higher expectation, a greater win total because of a lot of factors. And I'll kind of dive into them as I go through this monologue here. But 40 new players. He let go of the ones that I think we all thought needed to go. They just kind of found their place here because of virtue, again, of a very thin roster. So we'll talk about names to know. Nick Vadiato, if you don't already know this name in Conference USA, you better get used to it. A 3,000-yard passer in 2 straight years. Positive touchdown interception ratio. He's going to be one of the best. He doesn't necessarily always have the flashy numbers like we saw from a Caden Veltkamp or even a Keon Jenkins type, but he is always going to be the best playmaker on the field, which gives the Blue Raiders an opportunity. However, the biggest question mark was that offense last year under new OC Bodie Reeder, one of the worst performing offenses in the conference, ahead of just Kennesaw State, who had their own quarterback issues, which, again, is concerning when you have one of the best quarterbacks in Conference USA that threw for 3,000 yards and you can't eclipse the 20 points per game mark. So that's an area that the Blue Raiders hope to improve with wideouts returning like Miles Butler, but adding Arizona transfer A.J. Jones, Gamarion Carter, who's a Vanderbilt transfer from last year, adding Tavion Petaway from Purdue is another guy who's going to kind of fill that role that we had with Holden Willis. Cameron Lacey's a returner at the wideout position that I love him a lot. I think he has a lot of NFL comps to guys like Richie James, Ty Lee. I know if you're a Blue Raider fan, you're tired of me saying that, but Cameron Lacey is the breakout player to keep an eye on for the Blue Raiders because he has that type of speed and potential. And OC Bodie Reeder said himself in last week's live stream that he is the player to watch. So look forward to that. On the defensive side, again, one of the worst performing defenses in Conference USA last year in terms of yards, rushing yards allowed, and points allowed. But that unit as a whole has improved. And we're talking about the defensive line that has the most continuity, which is the area that we had I would say, the best potential last season with guys like Anthony Bynum, We've got guys like Shakai Woods. I think that defensive line unit is going to be strong. However, the depth is an area that I have concern. But in the backfield, at linebacker, you return Parker Hughes, all CUSA. Alex Mitchell's a Chattanooga transfer that had over 100 tackles for the Mocs last year. So a guy that's going to really shore up that thin linebacker unit that got injured a lot last year. And then in the secondary, you're going to return Purdue transfer Brendan Harris, who has a lot of FBS experience. I believe this is year 7 for him. He got a waiver. Happy to have him back, a guy that only played, I think, 2 games last year before he went down with a leg injury. And then we also bring back John House, the fourth, another guy that has SEC experience that transferred along with Coach Mason here. So that defensive backfield, it looks promising. I think we have some good anchor points. It's just the depth pieces on the defensive side that will decide if this team moves at all this year. I think the offense is going to be improved because of the offensive line as a whole. Poor Nick Vadiato running for his dear life last year because of that awful offensive line. But this group that Coach Mason has put together, it was a point of emphasis in the NIL era that he was going to put all of his money into an offensive line, and he certainly did that, bringing back Zach Clayton at left tackle, who's going to be a sophomore this year, bringing back Mateo Guevara. We have EJ Harris, an Auburn transfer, who's going to be one of the largest guys in Conference USA in the interior line. And then Jacob Otts, massive human being, is going to be playing left tackle from Rhode Island, one of the best FCS linemen that was in the portal. So he put his money where his mouth was. But not only that, I think the depth at offensive line is much better than it was last year. We were 2 injuries away from having the worst offensive line last year, where this year we feel a lot better. Even Ellis Adams, who made the all-roundtable team, potentially may not even start because of how deep this offensive line unit is. So I look forward to what the Blue Raiders can do. The expectation last year, I was drinking the blue Kool-Aid. I said 6 wins. They're going to make a bowl game. Didn't even get close. So my expectations, I've shored them up a little bit. I would like to think they can get to the 6-win mark because that schedule is so easy. It is the easiest schedule I've seen the Blue Raiders have in years, and it all starts with a non-conference. They start the season off against Austin Peay. Then they go on the road to Wisconsin. Not necessarily, I would say, easy, but of all the P4 games that a Conference USA team could draw, Wisconsin is probably one of the more favorable matchups. Then you've got Nevada on the road, and then you've got Marshall, another school that is really trying to rebuild themselves. And then you got the Conference USA slate, much like Moffitt had mentioned. We get to avoid the Liberty. We get to avoid the Liberty train. We also get to avoid UTEP, another school that, in my opinion, could either be very good or very bad. But nonetheless, you avoid Scotty Walden, who has a good roster, so we avoid that mark. But we get all the newcomers, and everyone on our Conference USA schedule is full of first-time head coaches. I'm talking FIU. You even have Missouri State, Delaware, who are also first-time FBS head coaches. Kennesaw State, another one. So you have favorable matchups that I would be very upset if the Blue Raiders don't make a bowl game this year. They may not be ready to push themselves for a Conference USA championship. However, I think a bowl game is within reasonable expectation, and it'd be a great send-off for Nick Vadiato, who his freshman year won a Bahamas Bowl MVP. So let's hope that we can make a return to a bowl game for his sake, and obviously his long tenure here, where he'll go down as potentially the second best quarterback in MTSU history. So exciting stuff for the Blue Raiders, and exciting stuff for all of us here at the Conference USA Podcast Roundtable. We breeze through that as quickly as we can, just over an hour. Appreciate the fans that are listening to us, that have stuck around this long. One last thing before we hang up the call and say our final goodbyes. We have a new YouTube channel. This is live streaming on YouTube. If you're listening to us on X and Twitter, head over to YouTube, find us, CUSA Podcast Roundtable. Our uploads will be live streamed there. Of course, if we have any pre-recordings, they'll be uploaded there. You can see all of our old episodes. And if you are listening to us on X and Twitter, what are you doing? You've got to follow us over there. Don't miss any of these uploads, because this isn't the last preview. Tomorrow night, Jake Gibson, host, not only for Paws Up Podcast, but also for the rest of the what we're calling the future division. So you don't want to miss that preview. Same time, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. He's going to have all of those guys over there talking everything CUSA football on that side. I'm excited about it, guys. One last time, I appreciate everyone for listening. You guys for taking the time to do this. We'll be hearing from you guys all again, hopefully in the near future. But for the last time tonight, thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time.